Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my October reading wrap up. October was a pretty good reading month for me. There weren't any spectacular, amazing new favorites, but I did enjoy all of the books that I read and I thought they were all good. So definitely a lot of recommendations that you can take away from this wrap up. I read mostly thrillers in October, which is definitely to be expected with it being spooky season. And I did a pretty good job at sticking to the TBR that I set. I completed reading 3 of the books and then I'm in the middle of a 4th one. So I almost made it 50% of the way through that TBR, which is definitely better than I've been doing in previous months. So with that, let's jump right into the wrap up. The very first book that I read in October is The Wingman by Stephanie Archer. This is a pretty new release that came out at the end of September, and it is the 3rd book in her Vancouver Storm series, which are hockey romances. I thoroughly enjoyed the first 2 books in this series, so I could not wait to continue on and read more from Stephanie Archer and more of these books. This whole series is on Kindle Unlimited, so that is how I read this one. Basically, in The Wingman, we are following our female main character Darcy and then our male main character and professional hockey player named Hayden. They have a very interesting and unique dynamic, which we kind of were introduced to at the end of book 2. But basically, Darcy was in a really long-term relationship with Hayden's best friend Kit, so she also kind of became Hayden's best friend just by default. Kit and Darcy end up having a really bad breakup, and Hayden kind of sides with Darcy and is there more as her friend and to support her through the breakup. And then when Darcy is kind of ready to get back into the dating scene, get back into the swing of things, it has been years since she's had to like flirt and learn how to date. So she definitely wants to go to Hayden for tips because he is kind of our playboy character who gets all the girls, which I normally really dislike a playboy male main character. But the way Hayden is written, he doesn't have like this cocky arrogance to him. He is very much still golden retriever. And the more you learn about why he is the way he is, it made me like him a lot more, even though he is kind of like the playboy character. But basically that is kind of where the romance develops, is when Darcy is going to Hayden for dating tips. It's kind of like a fake dating trope. And I did like this one, but I definitely had some critiques of it. I gave it 3.75 stars, which would make it my least favorite in the series so far. I love Stephanie Archer's writing so much. I think she just writes the most bingeable, fun books. I just have the best time reading them. They're definitely the type of romances where you're just gonna be like kicking your feet, giggling, screaming. She does tension so well. She writes these characters in a way where you just cannot wait for them to get together and you're really rooting for them. But I don't know, I definitely had critiques of our characters in here, both individually and together as a couple. For starters, I feel like their dynamic was just kind of weird. There was never really that strong of a reason I felt to hate the ex-boyfriend, so I couldn't really completely understand why Hayden would automatically just jump to defend Darcy and be there to support her more and just kind of like write off his old best friend Kit when he was really like the OG friend. I don't know, I never really understood that. It always seemed a little weird that he would just like kind of have romantic feelings for his best friend's ex-girlfriend. But the characters were written in a really likable way, so I wasn't like rooting against them or anything, but it always just felt a little weird for me and I could never completely understand the dynamic. I also feel like our main characters had not a whole lot of depth to them and they didn't really feel fleshed out. We also don't get a lot of backstory on the characters individually. Like their parents are never mentioned. We don't know anything about their family lives or what their interests and hobbies are outside of being into each other. It was also weird because like obviously Hayden is a hockey player, that's his job. It was a big part of the story since it's a hockey romance. But Darcy's job, like her job title was definitely mentioned, but then it never really talks about her like going to work and actually doing her job. So I was just kind of like, what are you doing all day? Like it just seemed like she was waiting around for Hayden to come home. And I don't know, the characters just needed to be a bit more fleshed out for me. I definitely feel like there was a little bit of depth lacking there, but it is a cutesy, fun romance, so I'm not gonna judge it that harshly based off that. But I did feel like books 1 and 2 in this series had those elements to them, so I don't know, that was definitely missing for me in this book. I also feel like the romance got a little bit lusty at times. Like if you're gonna say they knew each other for 8 years, I feel like some of that should have been on page to make me believe it, because I don't know, it just kind of like jumped into things a little bit quickly. But despite having the critiques, it was still so fun, so cute, and I love this series so much and I cannot wait for book 4. This one definitely set up that book and what characters we're going to be following and the tropes, so I cannot wait. Okay, then jumping into some thrillers, the next 3 books I read were part of my reading thrillers, reading spooky books, reading vlog. So if you want more in-depth thoughts on any of these books I'm going to talk about, definitely watch that video. I'll link it above and below for you guys. But the first book I read for that video is A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson. I actually listened to this one on audio, and this is the 3rd book in a series of his. It follows the Kindworth killing and the Kindworth saving. The Kindworth killing is one of my favorite thrillers of all time and one of my 5-star reads. If you watch my videos, I'm sure you've heard me talk about that book nonstop because I'm obsessed with it. So I was really excited for the 2nd book that came out last year that definitely wrapped up a lot of things that happened in book 1 and gave me a lot of closure. So I had no idea he was continuing on with the series and writing more. So it was a very pleasant surprise when I found out book 3 was out. In this one, our female main character believes that her husband might be a serial killer. Her husband is this like salesman who goes around to all these different teacher conferences, and he sells kind of like gag gift novelty items to teachers. And his wife discovers that in all of these cities where he attends these conferences, during the same time frame, there is a woman who turns up dead. So she ends up enlisting the help of another person who is a character that we know very well from previous books in this series to help her kind of figure out the mystery. I gave this one 3.75 stars. I definitely liked the first half a lot more than the second half. The first half was definitely like setting up the story really well, and it was very thrilling and very exciting. It leaves you with so many questions, and I was putting pieces together, trying to figure things out, having all these theories. And then at the halfway point, you kind of figure things out. So the second half of the book just becomes like the aftermath of what you learn, and it's really more just like an action-packed adventure kind of ride, and the mystery element is kind of already uncovered, so we lose that in the second half of the book. So to me, it definitely made it less thrilling. Also, the character from previous books that was brought back, I love this character. They're one of my favorites and I find them so interesting, so I was really happy to have them back in the story and be reading from their POV again. But I also had a little bit of trouble completely believing why this character would want to help our main character and why they would be invested at all. So kind of had to suspend my disbelief a little bit for that part and just enjoy my time and not ask too many questions. But probably my second favorite out of all 3 books in this series. I definitely liked the storyline and the characters that we were following in this one more than book 2. I liked book 2, I think, more for the fact that it gave closure to the events in book 1. But book 1 is always going to be my favorite. I think it is a 5-star read and just can't be topped. But I think Peter Swanson's storytelling and writing is just incredible. It is very gripping, and I thought this was a really good one for spooky season. The next book I read for that video is a novella. This is Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio, and this is actually a recent release too. It came out at the end of September. This one follows this group of friends, and they all meet up in the middle of the night in this graveyard. They all work like night shift type jobs, so they kind of know that they're always going to be the only people there because the graveyard hasn't been used in forever and it's the middle of the night. So it kind of becomes their regular spot. And on this one night in particular that our story is following, our characters go to their hangout spot and discover that there is a freshly dug grave just in the middle of this graveyard, and they're like, what is going on? Because it hasn't been used in years, so what is the purpose of this grave being dug? And from there we follow the story over the course of one night. We do get all 5 characters POVs, and it is broken up hour by hour over this one night from midnight until like 10 a.m. the next morning. I gave this one 3 stars. I definitely liked the vibes of it. I love M.L. Rio's writing style. She is the author of If We Were Villains, and that is the only other thing that she's written, so I was very happy to get more from her. She writes the most interesting and unique characters. They're all very flawed, but they feel very realistic, so I really enjoy my time reading about them. This one was perfect for spooky season because of how atmospheric it was and how eerie, and just the setting of the graveyard and it taking place over this one night. I really enjoyed the way the story was told and the structure of things. For a good portion of the novella, I did think I had it figured out and I knew where it was going, just because the hints that we were getting felt very similar to another book that I read, but it ended up taking a different direction with it. So I really enjoyed how this one did things. But I think for me, I'm just not the biggest novella person. I definitely need more time with the characters and more to the storyline and more depth to really get invested and really connect. So I just don't think this one's gonna really stick with with me, but I enjoyed it for what it was and had a fun time in the moment. And then the last book I read for that Reading Spooky Books video is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This one follows our main character, Lenora. She is an older woman who has had a few strokes, so she is unable to speak, she's unable to move really, and she lives in this kind of like isolated gothic mansion on the edge of this cliff, and she is in need of a caregiver. So that's where our other main character, Kit, comes in to come take care of Lenora. Lenora is pretty infamous because she was accused of murdering her entire family back in the day. So as Kit is there being her caregiver, she kind of is uncovering things as she learns more about Lenora, and she's trying to figure out if Lenora actually did murder her whole family or not, and what else could be going on in this creepy mansion. I gave this one 3.75 stars, which is kind of in the middle for me when it comes to how I've rated Riley Sager's books. He is definitely an auto-buy author for me. Like, I enjoy all of his books and think they're all very well written. I think the concepts of them are all super cool, and to me they kind of read like a cheesy, scary movie, but in the best way. I will say this one had kind of a slow start for me, and it was definitely a lot of build up, and it was very repetitive, and really the only thing making me push through was that everyone says there are so many twists and turns in this book. So I was really anxious to get to the twists and turns, but the whole time I was reading I was like, okay, this needs to pick up. I'm ready for something to happen. I also didn't trust any of the characters in here, so I feel like that also prevented me from getting really invested because I had absolutely no one that I was rooting for. Our narrators, our main characters, our side characters, even our super brief minor characters, I didn't trust or like anyone, so in my eyes any of them could have been the bad guy. So I was afraid that would impact how I felt about the reveal. I thought I might not be shocked by it, but I still ended up being pretty shocked by the twist. I wasn't expecting a lot of things that came from the reveal, but I just think it did prevent me from getting invested the whole way through since I didn't have anyone that I was rooting for and didn't trust anyone. Definitely not my favorite from him, but not my least favorite either. Somewhere in the middle, like I said, in terms of how I feel about his books is how I feel about this one. And then I read The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. This is a fun witchy romance. It is the book that follows the ex-hex, and in this book we are following Gwen, who is the cousin of our main female character in book one, and then we're also following our male main character Wells, who is the brother of Reese, also from book one. Wells and Gwen kind of have a history of coming from feuding witch families. They're both witches, and Wells and his family is originally from Wales, and then Gwen and her family live in Georgia. So Wells ends up coming to Georgia from Wales to reestablish his family's magical connection in this city because currently Gwen and her family kind of run the magic in the city. It's kind of confusing to explain, but it's not that serious when you end up reading it. Gwen owns this like witchy novelty gift shop in the town, and Wells ends up opening a very similar kind of more like highbrow witchy gift shop across the street. Gwen and Wells already kind of disliked each other and got off on the wrong foot, so this makes them even more so rivals. But there ends up being an outside witch that comes to town, and Gwen's powers start fading away, so Gwen and Wells team up to try and discover what's going on with this new witch coming to town and what's going on with her powers fading. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It is definitely the perfect thing for spooky season. I was wanting something to kind of get me in the Halloween spirit, and this did just that. I love the setting of these books. It takes place in a town that very much feels like Halloween town. It is so fun. It wasn't anything like that deep or serious. It was a fun storyline, but nothing that's gonna really stick with me. I do feel like the romance was lacking a little bit in chemistry. Like, I wasn't obsessed with them as a couple, but I do feel like these books have a lot more to them. Like, there's definitely a strong storyline outside of the romance, which I liked. So there was a lot for me to enjoy, even if I wasn't completely feeling the romance. But yeah, I just love the witchy vibes of this one and the setting, and it was the perfect thing to get me in the Halloween mood. And then the last book that I read in October, I actually finished this last night at like 2 in the morning. My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This book follows this very seemingly normal married couple. They live in the suburbs, they do normal family things, have normal jobs. They have 2 children who they make sure they do their homework, eat healthy, all just the normal suburban family things that you would think of when you think of a just typical American family, except the couple kind of gets bored with their lives, so they take up a new hobby of murdering people. I gave this one 4 stars. It was definitely my favorite book that I read last month. Like I said, I was up until 2 a.m. finishing it last night, so that's kind of how it was with this book. I would be up very late reading it until I was just so tired and fell asleep because I needed to know what was going to happen. All the chapters are very short and pretty much all of them end on a cliffhanger, so this is a good slump buster for sure. This one was so interesting to me. I feel like there aren't that many books or pieces of media out there where you get the perspective of the killers, so this was just so interesting to read. It was crazy to see how what they were doing kind of had like these chain reactions. This book was very detail oriented, which I really love, and I love when all the little pieces kind of come together and just make sense. I will say it did get a little slow in parts. Like there were some moments where I was like, okay, I feel like this can be wrapped up in like 2 more chapters. I don't know where this is gonna go. I need something to happen. And then something would happen and you're like, oh my gosh, this story just keeps going. What is gonna happen next? Because I just kept having this cycle of thinking it was about over and about wrapped up, and then something new would come into play to just add a level of craziness that I was not expecting. Even though it was slow in some parts, I was never bored. Like it definitely kept me very invested and interested the whole time. I had the most visceral reactions to this book. Like I was giving my husband a play-by-play of everything that was happening. It's definitely one of those books where you're gonna wanna have someone to tell all your thoughts to. I really had no idea where this book was going. Like it kind of felt like it was leading up to a logical progression of events, which I still would have enjoyed, but the ending was so unexpected for me and definitely caught me off guard and took me by surprise. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done, and it made all the build up and all the moments that were a little slow for me well worth it. I would definitely recommend this one if you can handle a darker, creepy thriller. This was such a good time. So those are all the books that I read in October. Let me know what you guys read in October, or if you read any of the books that I read. Let me know all your thoughts on them down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you are not already, so you don't miss out on any future book videos from me. I am so excited to jump into another month of reading with you guys. I can't believe we only have 2 months left in the year, so get ready for lots of end of the year and then holiday content, and it's coming up quick. So thank you guys again for being here and for watching, and I will see you so soon in my next one. Bye guys.